You can manifest the desires on your heart, even if you feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster. Even if you are highly sensitive or empathic or just a human who feels deeply and has a full repertoire of emotions, you can still vibrate high and in harmony and resonance with the desires on your heart. So let's talk about why this is and how to turn any emotion into a high vibe experience that has you attracting the desire that is most on your heart and soul. Okay, so if you've been in the deliberate creation space, then you know so many emotions have been labeled positive and negative, high vibe, low vibe. Let's clear all of this confusion up because this is a huge one for people, and it was a major point of confusion for me. It caused me all kinds of angst and really derailed me time and time again. So the first thing we need to do is talk about the difference between feeling and emotions. Neville Goddard talks about feelings. He says feelings is the secret. Feel yourself in the wish fulfilled. And I couldn't agree more. That's absolutely true in all of my experience. So, yes, feeling is important, but you can feel in resonance with your heart desire even when your emotion is not one of those emotions that you would say feels particularly good. I manifested my husband when I was in a state of grief. I've manifested all kinds of things from a state of stress and anxiety. The feeling is the secret, but the feeling is different from the emotion. Feeling can be a conscious choice. Emotion can be conscious, but oftentimes it's an unconscious reaction. So let's talk about how you can recognize the emotion and work with it so that you can be feeling high vibe even when you're in an emotional state that doesn't necessarily feel good. So here's the deal. Emotion is something that is triggered from an internal or external stimuli. It is a reaction. Oftentimes, it's a learned reaction. We watched people around us react to certain situations in certain ways, and we started to have those same connections in our brain, right? If you knew somebody close to you who was afraid of spiders, then spiders can very easily be something that is terrifying to you as well, right? And the same goes for all kinds of different emotions. These things make us happy, these things make us sad, right? And we can link these patterns up in our brains. So the first thing to do is recognize when you have an emotion, just recognize it as the effect. It just is. There was a cause. There was something that happened that caused this reaction. And you can really check in with yourself and say, okay, first of all, is this mine? Is this emotion mine? Or is it something that I'm picking up from somebody else? Am I feeling anxious because the people around me are anxious? Or am I feeling it because I've been taught that when certain things happen, we're supposed to feel anxious, or we're supposed to feel afraid, or we're supposed to feel stressed? So the first thing is just to stop criticizing yourself for having the emotion, stop judging the emotion or worrying about it in any way, and just surrendering to the sensation and asking yourself what information you can get from it. So if this is the effect, what was the cause? So let's use the example of anger. I'm sure many of us have had the experience of being hangry, where we're angry because we realize we're really hungry. We have a physiological need that has not been met, and so now we're angry. We're seeking out food, and it's causing all of this stress in our bodies, right? We eat, we feel better, right? So the first thing to do is be like, okay, what is the cause of this emotion? Did somebody do something to create this anger, to stimulate or trigger this anger within me? And what am I telling myself about that? Right? So it could be like I'm making assumptions about what this person did or my interpretation of it. It could be rooted in a story. It could be rooted in some sort of belief of victimization or something of that nature. And it could also be anger that is completely justified. It could be an indication that a boundary has been broken, and the anger is your clue to stand up for yourself, to have a difficult conversation, to create a boundary or reinforce a boundary, right? So the anger in and of itself is just data. And it is low vibe if we shame ourselves for the anger, or we criticize the anger, or we make ourselves wrong in any way, or we try to suppress the anger. Any of those things actually creates all kinds of low vibe tension. Whereas if we can say, okay, interesting, I'm having anger. What's happening? Am I hungry? Am I uncomfortable? What need is not being met? And how can I support myself in getting that need met? If it's not an internal stimulus that has caused this anger, then I can look around and say, okay, what's happening in the environment? Am I picking up on the anger from somebody else? I'm feeling uncomfortable because I'm noticing that there's this tension in the room. How can I support myself in allowing this to move? Because it's just energy, right? The anger is just energy. And if we can support the movement of it, then we can release it and let it go. So what might that mean? It could mean leaving the room. It could mean having a conversation, right? So we're just basically investigating non-critically. We're recognizing, here is this emotion. How can I have love and compassion for myself, love and compassion for others? And rather than make the emotion wrong, just look at the data and see what needs to be addressed. Then we can say, actually, is this a reaction that feels healthy? Because sometimes anger is a very healthy reaction. A boundary has been violated, and that's a healthy reaction. We don't want to suppress or deprogram ourselves from having an anger response when it is a healthy one. But if we're finding that it's an unhealthy response, unhealthy meaning it's not actually moving us in the direction of our desires, then we can say, okay, I'm noticing that I'm making assumptions about this, or I'm reacting with anger in the way that I was taught because that's how my parents reacted, or that's how somebody else I know or cared about reacted. And I'm just sort of following how they managed with conflict because that's all I ever knew. Well, then we can consciously choose to program ourselves to react differently. We can say, okay, I'm recognizing this anger, and now I want to link that to another emotional response in the future. And there are ways that we can do that, and we can get that grounded into our body. So then when we have that stimulus again, our default can be different, right? So if we go to the spider example, if we're like, oh, every time I see a spider, I'm terrified, but I actually don't think that that's the response that I would like to continue to have, well, then we can do things to support ourselves in feeling differently or in reaction to a spider in the future, right? So there are things that we can do to reprogram those connections in our mind. So the idea is to say, okay, here is this emotional state. It's just a state. It's just a temporary emotion. It is going to move. It is going to flow. And if I can recognize it and allow it, if I can feel at peace with that in this moment, then I can allow it to move and I can respond to it rather than react in it. And part of reacting is criticizing it, shaming it, making it wrong, making other people wrong, right? Whereas if we can just say, this is the emotion, it is what it is, and I'm going to love and appreciate myself anyway. I'm going to feel good anyway. I'm going to feel at peace with having this emotion. I'm going to allow this emotion to move freely in a healthy, constructive way, in a way that I consciously choose how I want to move this emotion. And I'm going to feel in integrity with it. I'm going to feel responsible. I'm going to feel gratitude because I have the awareness to allow this emotion to move. I have the awareness to choose how I want to allow this emotion to move in a healthy way. So these are all things that are very high vibe, right? All of these feelings where we're saying, okay, I'm feeling, or I'm in a state of anger and I want to allow that to move. So how can I respond in a way that feels in integrity with me? And then we choose to move in that direction. That feels really good. It feels really good to release our emotions in a healthy, positive way. And then it's done, right? So the whole idea is not to squash your emotions, not to deny them, but to say, I have this beautiful repertoire of emotions. It is guiding me. It is creating this richness and this fulfillment in my life because I get to feel all of these things. I don't want to repress these emotions, but I don't need to make them wrong. I don't need to see them as problems. I don't need to criticize myself for them. And if I can allow them and flow with them and drop the story, drop the judgment, and really choose to be in integrity and maturity and act and teach myself and get help to teach myself how to react in healthy, mature ways, then it's super high vibe and it feels really good. It feels really good to be honest about how we're feeling emotionally. And so then when we are grieving or we're stressed or we're anxious or we're in fear, we can also have this calmness about us because we're not battling it. We're not arguing with ourselves or making ourselves wrong. And so that is very high vibe. It's not so much about the emotion that's the low vibe. It's how we are dancing with the emotion. Because if we're making the emotion so wrong and we're constricting and shutting down, then we really can't see the openings. We can't see all of the opportunities. When we are in these emotional states and we're just letting ourselves be buoyant and we're allowing them to move and flow, they don't last very long. And when we're in that state of openness and receptivity and authenticity, then we're actually expanded and we can see opportunity. And when we can see the opportunity, we can move in the direction of that opportunity. That is what allowed me to be in a deep state of grief while also being able to see my future husband because I was letting myself feel the grief. I wasn't holding back. I wasn't denying it. I wasn't making myself wrong for it. I was just allowing it to move through me. And in that state of non resistance, I could see him and I could be grateful that I was processing all of this and allowing it to move and not holding on to it. Right. And that kept me open and receptive to being able to receive this relationship. And my hope is that you'll really see for yourself all of the power in your emotions, that you can actually be guided by them and recognize when there is something within you that needs to move and you can choose to move it in a healthy, constructive way. And when we do that, we let it go, it moves. And the letting go and the movement, that's the high vibe. Just being able to ride it out and roll with it is very high vibe. So that is what allows us to create the desires that are most on our heart and to vibrate, to be in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, because we can feel the wish fulfilled even if we're feeling grief or sadness or anger. Because when your wish is fulfilled, you're still going to be human. You're still going to have days where you're feeling all of these things, even when you're living in that incredible house that you want to manifest, or even when you have that business that you want to manifest. You're not going to get to this state of like, oh, I manifested all the money or the relationship, and now I'm just going to feel happy all of the time. It doesn't work that way. So if we can learn to allow our emotions to move and flow and be there simultaneously, then we can be in the spirit of the wish fulfilled no matter what emotion we're in. We can just feel like all of it. We can be human. I hope that's helpful. If this has been helpful, I would love for you to share it in the comments below and let me know. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Kirsten Barrett. Have a great rest of your day.